Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Minecraft Podcast. Katarina here, and it is my great pleasure to welcome today JJ Vega, all the way from Texas. How are you this morning, JJ?
I'm doing extremely well. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. So it's 1:30 or quarter to one. Sorry, quarter to two in the UK. So I'm really grateful you making the time to meet with me online this early in the day. I really appreciate it.
Of course,
And
it's a lovely excuse to drink some good coffee and have a great conversation. So it's really just delightful to me.
and we were just saying how we didn't realize it's the 12th of December, so 12th day of the 12th month in the year. So a magical number of cycle completion. You can look at it from the perspective of the 12 months in the year. I think there were 12 disciples, Jesus had 12 disciples. There's lots of ways of looking at it. Um, so I think it's a really good day to meet for a podcast recording.
I agree.
Excellent. So I met JJ in the wonderful world of LinkedIn online. I rejoined LinkedIn about 7 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that. Um, and yeah, it's been a little revelation of how far LinkedIn has come and the various shares and posts that appear on there because yeah, I had a certain idea of what LinkedIn looks like, and yeah, it's been a revelation. So I got to meet people like you, JJ, and it's been wonderful. And I know you as someone who's terrific with words, someone who likes to write and share ideas in that space. I know you wear other hats as well, but maybe tell us a little bit about you just for people to meet you, and then we'll dive into our conversation.
Well, again, thanks for the invitation to have the conversation. I'm really honored to be a guest here.
Mm.
And it's been so good to be connected with you. And like yourself, I was on LinkedIn, but not really on it and actively creating content and making connections. And I think about actually January of this year, I decided, especially someone that works fully remote, that I just wanted to expand my network a little bit. So I started getting it more into creating content and writing and writing and writing and just meeting really cool people and seeing that LinkedIn had moved from being a very kind of uptight, like we're professional with suits on, to, well, we're professional, but we have jeans on. And now I'm really starting to see, especially in the last about 6 months or so, that we're professional and we're rolling our yoga mats out. So there's a lot more people that are sharing about things that are deeper for them, that are true for them, and that extend beyond the artifice that we can sometimes put up in front of ourselves and call our professional identity. And so the things that I've been seeing out in that world were inspiring me to create more. So just kind of a snapshot of who I am right now. I, like you said, live in Dallas, Texas. I am currently a web developer and digital marketer for a very small company that teaches software development skills to career switchers. And really, for the last 3 years, I was actively teaching and spending most of my days in one-on-one calls with people from all backgrounds and all temperaments, and really getting not just into the teaching mentoring side of things, but also the coaching side of things. Because everyone I was talking to was trying to make some kind of a change in their lives. They wanted to move from where they are right now to some imagined future where they believe things would be better. And it's no exaggeration to say that I've spent probably thousands of hours in those conversations with people. And I just started seeing the same pattern over and over and over again. This idea that I'm not whole right now. And if I do this thing, get this job or find this relationship or make this move, then that sense of wholeness and peace is going to be there on the other side. And I found that fascinating. And I've also experienced that myself too. You know, I've been on that hamster wheel. So, so I started writing about that. And so like my day job, I've, moved more into the storytelling part of my company and really trying to help it connect with the people that can benefit from the types of education that we do. And by night, I'm writing up a storm about some of the deeper ideas I'm developing around what it means to already be a whole person and to move through your life from that place. So not self-improvement, but unfolding. And then in February, I'm going to be starting a coach training program that actively creates developmental containers around that concept of unfolding, and hoping to start a practice in the year 2024 is the goal. So that's, I mean, there's a lot more I could say, but I'll just leave it there. That's kind of a snapshot of JJ right now.
Oh, I love that so much. And I can already tell you're going to be an amazing coach because you probably already are. You just need a piece of paper to say, yeah, I can do this.
I need formation is what I need.
Okay.
To be in conversations with other people who are doing some of the same things and can show me the things that I can't see. I'm less concerned about the piece of paper. I mean, I work in alternative education, and I've seen that the piece of paper matters way less for someone's ability to do a job or to perform a skill. But there does still need to be a methodology and approach
Mm.
and a community of accountability. And that's really what I'm hoping for from the program.
So I'd like to come back to the concept that you've mentioned of um, we are already whole, because as it happens, that's um, your post today actually was like the opening sentence was that. So you've just given us an example of people you've worked with that are in that mindset that if only they are somewhere else, if they make this change, then they will be happier and the peace and joy will come. So how would you explain to someone what you mean when you say you are already whole, to someone who maybe doesn't quite understand this concept as yet?
Sure. Well, I'll preface by saying that it definitely depends on where that person is in their
Hmm.
own journey, right? So I'm going to make a couple of assumptions about this hypothetical person and say they're probably like a mid 30s to 40s professional. We'll say that they have a family,
Hmm.
so maybe a spouse, partner, and kids. And they may or may not have flirted with the idea of spirituality and some kind of a spiritual practice. Maybe they grew up going to the church, but they don't go anymore. Maybe they've gone to yoga classes and they were interested in the physical element, but maybe not so much the spiritual element. So that's the person that I'm going to try to explain it to right now, right? Because my assumption about that person is that they've grown up in similar cultures that I grew up in, that tied my worth as a human being to external markers of value, right? So things like having a certain income, a certain amount of money that you're making, things like having a certain job that confers upon you a certain status, having a certain family system that you're building, like all these things that we would say are um, you know, external markers. It's like someone can easily see that and interact with you based around those things. And the message to those people in that culture is that you constantly have to be doing things to improve yourself, right? Self-improvement. Self-help is a huge genre of books. There, I think something like 87,000 self-help books that have been published in the industry in the last 30 years. And all instruction manuals on how to basically take what you already have and make it better. And what those approaches fundamentally do often is they treat a human being kind of like a machine that's a collection of parts, right? And those parts have to be serviced and then eventually replaced. And sometimes you need to add parts because the parts you have aren't very good for whatever reason. And that's just the external cultural influences. Then there's also the emotional conditioning you receive as a young person and a child, especially in your family system, and traumas you may have experienced that you've not integrated, right? So again, we're still talking to this hypothetical person that is in the middle of this. So, they're living their lives and they're doing everything that they should be doing. And maybe they go talk to a therapist every once in a while. Maybe they get a coach. And they find that they might set some goals and they might achieve those goals. And they do the self-improvement thing and they're hustling. They're waking up at 5 a.m. They're taking cold showers. They're, running marathons. They're doing all the things. And there's a good feeling that comes and it lasts maybe for a little bit and then it goes away. And there's still this sense of like emptiness or incompletion or discomfort. There's still parts of their awareness that are stuck in the past or fixated on an imagined future. And they have a really hard time being present. So that's the table setting. If we bring it into this unfolding concept, unfolding basically says, okay, what if instead of being a collection of parts or a machine, you're an expression of nature with inherent purpose, right? Just like a hummingbird or a tree or a butterfly, every part of nature, we can actually look at nature, we can divide it into parts, we can see that's a tree, that's an animal, and yet nature also functions seamlessly as a whole, and all those parts work together in harmony to create the ecosystem, right? So the idea of unfolding is, okay, you're not this machine, you're actually this expression of nature. You are inherently whole and infused with purpose. You have something that you're made to be and do inside this ecosystem. And unfolding, instead of self-improvement, would say, well, what if we tap into that inherent purpose and that inherent design, essentially, of who you are in nature, and learn to allow that to express without resistance, instead of feeling like we need to add things or improve things. That was a long explanation. I hope I landed the plane. I'm only like 3 sips of coffee in. But
no, it's
but
beautiful.
That's basically the premise is, participate in your natural expression versus constantly being on the hamster wheel of, I need to add this, I need to do more, I need to do more, I need to do more, and sort of brimming with that underlying anxiety and often depression that comes with always striving for something that you'll never accomplish because you can't complete something that's already complete. And so you have to learn to become present with what already is and then work from there from a place of curiosity and interest and openness and relaxation.
I love that. You talked about me several years ago by saying this. I hadn't at that point done any cold showers or anything like that, but I was a new parent who struggled with mental health and just being a parent, really. And I definitely can relate to wanting to always finding things that I need to improve about myself that from my perspective back then seemed either not good enough or broken, needing to be fixed. And then when that part of me is fixed or replaced by something new, then all will be well. So I really relate to that. And I love your explanation with relation to nature, because what's helped me was meditation, mindfulness and meditation, and finding that ability to pause and really connect with the present moment, that then kind of allows you to see in everything in nature that as perfect as it is, right in the right place where it needs to be, with the right speed of development, you name it. And that also looking at it from the perspective that one flower doesn't look at the other flower and thinks, oh, this one's blooming quicker than me, or is it more bountiful and is more colorful than me. And yeah, so the comparison, which is the poison of our society right now as well, kind of came into that. And I look to nature for inspiration all the time. I go to nature for peace in myself, to ground myself, and just connect back to myself, but also just to kind of appreciate, well, several things. First, that everything is already whole and perfect. Second, that we evolve in cycle. We're cyclical beings, just like anything in nature. That there are no comparisons, and stillness. I love the way that I was just looking yesterday. I went for a walk, and all the trees are bare now, and yet they're still so beautiful and whole as they are. You could say, oh, their leaves are missing. There's something, we need to do about this, but no. So I also learned a beautiful fact recently, is that in autumn, all the trees already have buds ready for spring. So I went and looked, and they were there, ready. They just looked at these, like, black buds. I never noticed. So if you don't, this is the other problem I had also, was that I needed imminent changes, like straight away. Yeah. And if something didn't work, that meant that I was failing. Yeah. But knowing, again, this is another inspiration from nature, just to trust that things happen in their own kind of pace, within the best timing. And looking at these trees and the buds on them ready for spring 6 months earlier, I was like, wow, this is just another confirmation and revelation. And I love when the word you use, unfolding, because I like I said, I look to nature for a lot of inspiration. And one is when you say unfolding, I imagine like an closed fern branch, and as it slowly starts to unravel and open, that again, until it's kind of fully erect and beautiful, a bit like the butterfly that you talk about in your posts. That to me is another example of, like, you are already whole, like you say. You just kind of need to unfurl your wings, and there's nothing broken, nothing needs to be fixed. So I just wanted to add that to your point.
That's beautiful. You just said a lot of really interesting and profound things, and there are two thoughts that came up that I'd like to share in response. The first being that idea of the trees in the wintertime are already carrying the buds for spring. And I feel like I've been having a lot of conversations with people of late, also with myself, around this theme of impatience. Like, you can, when we're starting to really tune into like what is happening right now, and you'll notice my body language, like I'm not pointing here. I'm here, right? I'm in the heart, the gut, the body. You can feel, right, what's coming, and this voice is starting to quiet down. And there's that excited child part of ourselves that's just like, well, I just want it to happen now. I want to get the ice cream now, right? And these seasons, right, everything being in nature being cyclical, is such an important part of the process. And I think it's a good corrective to the way our cultures currently organize themselves. We're very always on and constant, and we don't often respect the down cycles, because we really like the up cycles. And so I think that idea is extremely important. And then the second thought that came up was, and I think it still works into the theme of patience, is when the fern hasn't fully unfurled, it's still beautiful. When the fern is a seed in the ground, it's beautiful. In all stages and all movements of its development, it's beautiful. It's a symphony. Every song has beginning, middle, end, quiet parts, loud parts, all types of dynamics. And one of the gifts of unfolding as a way to frame development, and not just of the individual, but also groups of individuals, organizations, and tribes, is that you can look at every part and say, this belongs, this belongs, this belongs, this belongs. And again, the voice of our culture right now, and the source of, I think, of a lot of anxiety and depression is, this doesn't belong. This part of me doesn't belong. That doesn't belong. This is wrong. The polarization and the addiction to that, splitting the field into what belongs and what doesn't. But like you said, you go into nature and you just are still there for a little bit, and you see that all these parts of the ecosystem at varying parts of development, every part belongs, and it's all beautiful, both in the parts and then also the whole that is being created there. So anyways, your beautiful thoughts, those are my thoughts in response.
We'll just carry on with the unfurling theme, because you did mention children. And when we look at how most of our responses in adult life come from a place of not feeling good enough, that could be caused by trauma. And we now know that the majority of trauma happens, or we bring with us from childhood. I have this, as you know, kind of vision of us adults treating children as those beautiful seeds that are just, in the soil, and we need to kind of nourish them, nurture them, so that they can kind of grow into beautiful furs and unfurl. And the responses that you've just described about feeling inadequate, or parts of us feeling inadequate, not good enough, comparing to ourselves. I just want to maybe go to that, and I'll just share for context. So this has been kind of the making of me becoming a mum and having I have two sons. They're now 13 and 10. And they are the reason I do what I do now, because what happened to me is that I wanted to be this gentle, respectful, compassionate parent, but their behavior, their responses caused me to react in a way that I really didn't like. And I kind of worked out that I am just repeating the patterns that I saw in my family as a kid, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, what's going on? How do I change this? So all of those moments led me to looking at my kind of inner child and healing those parts of me that were triggered in those situations. And I hope for a generation of children growing up now, because I know there are loads of parents who are trying to do the same right now, and it's not easy because we've had no role models. We're kind of working what's the word, I can't think of the word now, never mind. We're just basically work in progress, doing our best.
Yeah.
And I know that children are close to your heart. You're a godfather to 6, and you've shared this beautiful phrase or sentence in one of your posts about, I've got it here, that we're entering the age of wisdom, where we live in a culture that is not governed by the tyranny of the unchecked ego, and that it requires great emotional maturity. So would you be able to share with us maybe a bit more about what you mean by that, and maybe reflect on your own experiences. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate you inviting me to do that, and being so well prepared. By the way, excellent stuff. Yeah, so children, I guess we can start with the children aspect. So I was in the military for 4 years in my 20s. I'm 37 now, so this is a while ago. It's been about a decade since I was in. And I left the military with an interest in becoming a social worker, and specifically a social worker for abused children, and kind of working with child protective services. So I did about a year of education in social work, and I did an internship, and I went to AA meetings to study addiction, and I did a pretty wide range of study. And that was a good teacher to me, because I realized at that point I was not emotionally mature enough to enter that work without getting burned out. I could already see it. It was already happening in the educational portion. So I couldn't imagine how that would work out when I actually got on the job and was working with real cases. So I stepped back from that for a season, and thankful that I did, because I really do feel like I found a direction that's more in tune with who I am. But that wasn't actually the most profound part of that season. The most profound part was the work that I was doing part-time. So I don't know if you guys have this in the UK. In the States, we have an organization called the YMCA. You probably, okay. So the YMCA is,
it is here, but it doesn't operate in the same way as in the US. Yeah.
okay, cool. I'm trying to be aware of cultural
It's
differences. I
just
don't
a
want to
charity,
just
but they maybe you can explain to us a bit more the extent to which they help children, because it's not the same.
yeah. Yeah, it varies here in the States too, but the YMCA that I worked at had an aftercare children's program for kids ranging from, I think, as young as 4 or 5 years old, and then through to middle school age for us, which is about 11, 12, 13. So young children. And this was a program that was more affordable for parents who, were lower income or in poverty. Because as we know, childcare is insanely expensive. It's very, very expensive here in the States, prohibitively so. So I worked that program for a while. I was a counselor, and then I was a supervisor for a site. And as a counselor for kids, I had to learn this whole different skill set, because kids they're just emotional creatures, right? And so oftentimes as adults, we try to treat kids as if they have the same level of rational and cognitive development as we do, and it just doesn't work. So I had to learn to use my body differently. So literally get down on the level of a child so that I'm on their eye level. But the biggest lesson that I learned, and this kind of ties into some of the stuff that I wrote about in that post about the age of wisdom and emotional maturity, is that children have emotions and they express them freely, and they will always express them freely if we don't stop them from expressing them. But we do that, and our systems are designed to repress and suppress, sedate, and control children's emotionality, right? We put them into public school systems. We tell them to sit still, worst thing to tell a child. We tell them to be quiet, worst thing to tell a child, right? And I do think that's changing, and there's sensitivity to children's needs within those systems, but still, that's a really heavy conditioning. So what we're essentially churning out socially are adults with kids inside of them that have all these emotions that they haven't fully expressed. And so this kind of comes into that part stuff, is these parts of us are unintegrated because we haven't learned to fully feel the emotions unconditionally and express them in ways that are wholesome. Because emotions are just energy emotion. They're designed to come in and out they go, right? Through tears, laughter, wild shaking of the limbs, doesn't matter, right? It's just energy emotion. It's everything's energy. This is energy emotion. Our bodies are made to be sensitive to those things and respond to them. And that was a revelation to me to realize that I didn't have to do anything to control this kid's behavior as something was happening. It was just, hey, it's okay. I'll just sit here and you take as long as you need to cry. And then once that's done, it's done. And then we move on and we go back to playing, right? And I was like, man, what would happen if we did that as adults? It'd be interesting. And so that kind of led to me doing some emotional integration work on my own through a couple of different mediums. But an author, if your audience is interested, that I really resonated with and helped me is this man named Michael Brown. And he wrote a book called The Presence Process. And it was all about emotional integration through present moment awareness. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Very Eckhart Tolle-ish, but also a very different angle. And it's about embracing present moment awareness, which brings up the uncomfortable, unintegrated emotional experiences that we haven't fully processed. And then through present moment awareness, allowing them to come to completion, therefore growing up emotionally, right? And that was significant, probably the most significant thing that I've done in terms of my own development in my entire life. So back to what I was saying in the post, what I experience most often with adults is a high level of disintegration where they have, and it could be trauma, but it's not just trauma, it's literally just emotions that haven't been fully processed. They're just in there, they're in your body. And that is pulling them so far out of the present moment that they can't access their inherent wholeness. And so to me, the age of wisdom goes hand in hand with the age of emotional maturity, because until we're able to do for ourselves what we need to do in order to allow those things to come to completion and integration, we cannot have wise, loving relationships with other people. We cannot lead effectively inside our organizations and businesses and families. And we certainly can't treat children with the care and love that they need. And we can't allow them to express themselves and just be what they are because we haven't given that gift to ourselves. And a lot of that is ego. It's that fear of like, if I let go and just let this thing happen, I'm going to be annihilated. You know, it's like, that's the fear at the core of it. I'm going to get blasted out of existence. This is going to be so, like, my anger is going to be so terrible. It's going to destroy the world. My grief is going to be so powerful that it's going to wreck me from the inside. My fear is going to paralyze me to the point that I can't move. We're just afraid of those things. And it just adds more and more layers of resistance. So the ego is not real, just a collection of thoughts and voices. And we learn to be with our experience unconditionally, allow ourselves to unfold, integrate those emotions. And wisdom's just a natural byproduct, not something we have to get or gain. It just happens naturally. And so my vision is that as more people engage in that honest work, which doesn't really feel like work at all, it's really just being, then you do have a more enlightened society. And then you do have children that are growing up knowing that it's okay to feel what they feel, let it move, and then it's done. And now you have them becoming adults with all that crap that they're carrying around, you know? And I feel like that then leads the next generation to become wiser stewards of the planet, to be more conscious people in business. I mean, the implications are literally unimaginable. We can't imagine it from where we are. So anyways, that was a long one, but hopefully, again, I landed the plane.
The length is perfect. Absolutely. You needed to cover all of that. And I so resonate. Like you said, that for most adults who haven't worked on their kind of emotional maturity, when they're in a situation with a child that triggers them, causes a reaction, they revert back to the child within them and react from a place where they are like 5 or 6 or 7. And that is because it's a coping mechanism, because as children, they were not allowed to express their emotions. And they either suppressed them, that was, I dissociated with mine, or they go the other way where they kind of overreact. And And there's an overall sense, I sense that still a lot amongst teachers, a lot of people working with children, is that sense of control. Yeah, I need to have control. I can't let go of control. And that's partly because of the need to keep the emotions kind of in check, but also I think there's an underlying still kind of distrust that these children are whole. You know, they've come as complete, brilliant beings that just need to unfurl, and we need to kind of teach them stuff, right? We need to kind of tell them how to live life, and rather than trust that and just guide, you know, these beautiful beings into the life that they're gonna live. And one other thing I really miss in kind of general education of parents and people who work with children is the fact that, as for emotional regulation, we're not born with the ability to regulate our own emotions. So even though most people realize that if you say to a child to calm down, that that's probably not going to help, but also the fact that how they do regulate is through us. So what you've just described, the way you were with that child who was, you know, experiencing strong emotions, that you just kind of created what I would have said a safe space for them to express whatever was happening for them, so that the emotion just comes and goes as is natural to us, like you've described. So I found that that's been my biggest job as a parent, as someone who works with children, is to be the calm, for create that environment where they, through the kind of mirroring of the neurons, calm their nervous system and just let that emotion kind of pass. And yeah, I think that's probably, because I relate to that, that's probably the hardest for adults to do, because you then have to connect with that emotion in yourself, like that 5-year-old, 6-year-old, and just experience it all over again. But this time you need to be the adult for yourself as well. So you need to create that safe space for yourself and be in it. And I think when, you know, the more people that they do this, I think is the transformation is like, I can't, yeah, infinite. Like I can't, like you've said, is we're gonna definitely enter a different age, because, you know, as hard as I can still be on myself as a parent, and now that my boys are a bit older, I'm already seeing some little fruits of my efforts. I'm nowhere near perfect, but in terms of, you know, their reactions, they are already very different to me than when I was their age. So it's really hopeful. And I loved your diagram that you shared. It's not yours, I know. I've forgotten the name of the person who created it,
Cannot
about
take credit for it.
the natural development of human consciousness. And as I was reading your post and studying this image, that maybe you can just briefly explain to us what it is.
Sure.
I recognize myself even as an individual in like the different phases. And then I saw the teal one, and then beyond, and I thought that's where we're heading, because someone who is able to feel content in themselves, accepting of themselves just as they are, with the trust from those around them, they're not going to be interested in any of the kind of power games, control games, because there's no need. So
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to say. And I'd love to hear about, if you feel that it's useful for people to know about the uh, evolution of human consciousness model. That would be good.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, probably could take about 6 hours on that one, but I'll try to.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever you feel is more of benefit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of put it in a nutshell. So about 10 years ago ish, I was working in management for a company. I was running a division and then also doing their marketing. And I was really interested in getting better at leading. And I'll often tell people that the golden thread of my career has been leadership. And the kind of Sisyphus rolling a rock up a hill only to watch it come tumbling back down was me starting a job or a career or whatever, whether it was military or various companies I worked for. Like I would start these jobs and be like, I'm going to learn this new skill and craft and I'm just going to make it do things like everyone else does. And then, 6 months in, someone realizes I'm pretty good with people and they're like, hey, do you want to be a manager? And I would be a manager for a while and I'd get burned out and I'd say, I'm going to go like learn how to code or I'm going to learn to do this. And I'm just going to do that. And I'm not going to work with people. And then new job, 6 months in, same thing. I'm finally getting to a point in my life where I'm just accepting it and learning to work with that. But at this point in time, I was really interested in finding models and tools and frameworks to help me just be better with facilitating organizational development. Because I was already pretty good with individuals. I'd done, physical training and leadership stuff in the military and tons of like one-on-one training. And I'd done a lot of people stuff in management positions. So I read this book called Reinventing Organizations. It's by an author named Frederick Leroux. And people should definitely check that book out if they do anything. I mean, if you're just a person in the world, you should read that book. But definitely if you're in professional environments and you're in organizations, I think it's really helpful, especially leadership. And he writes about a model for understanding how human consciousness has developed over the centuries. And it's based off of another framework called spiral dynamics, I think Ernest Beck. And there's another author in there, and I'm forgetting who that person is, unfortunately. But there's a book also for spiral dynamics. People want to go down that rabbit hole, they can feel free. But essentially, it's characterizing stages of consciousness development by understanding how a broad group of people that are at that developmental stage are able to think, act, and organize amongst themselves. Like, what are the things that drive their organization? What are their motivations? How are they thinking about things? And then ultimately, how do they take action? And for your viewers that are familiar with Maslow's pyramid of needs, I'm probably saying that incorrectly, starts at the very base survival needs, food, shelter, water, stuff like that. And then as those basic needs are met, we can now move up to more, I would say, abstract needs that are still very important for whole human flourishing, all the way up to self-actualization. So moving from basic survival needs to certain emotional needs, to certain social needs, to certain vocational needs, and then to the idea of like the self-actualized, fully alive person that's living out their purpose. This model of consciousness is basically the same thing, but for large groups of people / the entire planet. So the idea is that each level has a color in this book. So it starts with, I think, red, amber, and these are groups that collect together in small tribes, and their driving motivations are power, fear, and they're really well suited for dealing with chaos. As an aside, and I think this is important to understand with development in general, if you are, say, at a quote unquote higher level of development, that doesn't mean that it's inherently better than the lower stages, right? It'd be like being an adult and then looking at a toddler and saying, you're kind of dumb because you're a toddler and I'm an adult and I'm better. Like, yeah, but you had to be a toddler in order to become an adult. And also there's skills that you learned during that stage that you still use today. If you hadn't learned how to crawl as a baby, you wouldn't be able to move as an adult. Same thing for, big groups of people. It's this idea that as we, move beyond some of those stages, we're able to transcend and include those skills. So at that base level, it's all power, fear, and chaos. And that's not great if you're trying to lead a conscious organization, but it's perfect for the zombie apocalypse. because at the end of the day, like, you want the people that are going to be like, okay, I'm the chieftain. This is how we're going to defend ourselves and survive.
Mm.
Right. And so from that level, you move into like very rigid hierarchical organizations. Like the Catholic Church is a great example of like an amber organization. And then you move into still hierarchical, but less strict um, profit and shareholder driven organizations, which is kind of the dominant thing right now. So that's orange. And then green is the next one up. That is where culture becomes more important than profits. And so people and values, there's a little bit more emphasis on that there. And then that brings us to teal, which is where we start to move away from organizations as machines into organizations as organisms. And the funny thing about this unfolding concept that we were talking about earlier is that this book was the first place I read it like 10 years ago. And I didn't really notice the unfolding concept until I picked it back up again a couple of months ago. And I was like, oh, it was there the whole time, just percolating back there. Right. So that's kind of the snapshot of the model. And the idea is that, you know, as we grow as a species, really, we're passing through these stages and transcending, including the previous stages, and sort of this constant evolutionary spiral that is deeply connected to how consciousness is expressing itself through us individually and collectively. And so we're moving from this place of what I would call mechanical consciousness, where everything's a separate object, and moving through that spectrum to more of an organismistic, that's not a word, an organism-centric perspective, where, yeah, we see ourselves as expressions of nature, and we're able to consciously participate in that movement of how do we organize, how do we do work that's meaningful and purpose driven and not necessarily profit driven, and also how do we bring our whole selves, you know, not just the rational logical parts and not just the systems parts, but the intuitive and creative and artistic parts as well. You know, how do we make business decisions with intuition as well as rational processes, you know, because intuition is not bound by time and space. It's a very interesting thing to put into the toolbox once you combine it with everything else. So again, Reinventing Organizations, great book. Spiral Dynamics, other great book. There's plenty of images out there and articles you can check out. If that explanation didn't make sense, I'd encourage people to look into it if it's something that strikes their fancy.
Thank you for this. I didn't realize the book's based on the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That makes perfect sense. There are now voices that actually say he got it a bit wrong, because if you only focus on survival needs minus love, then you're never gonna feel fulfilled, basically. So it's almost either upside down or intertwined in all of these stages, if you like. You need, yeah, there's the human need for community and love and acceptance and all that. And the other thing that popped to my mind as you were speaking, I'm a big fan of Greg Braden's work. I don't know if you're familiar with Greg Braden.
Oh yeah. Doesn't he
That's
have
okay.
a mullet?
This it's a
He's a guy
it's a
with a mullet,
story that
isn't he?
he shared. He was taking maybe I'll just introduce him a little bit. So he's done a
Sure.
lot of work for NASA. He's originally a geologist that would he would help them basically find the right minerals and things, but basically then kind of turned away from that kind of science because of the purpose it was fulfilling, and he's moved on to other greater things, and he was taking a group of people to I think it was the Andes in South America, and he had recently reunited with his mother after a long time where they weren't speaking. And they were walking up these mountains, and they saw one of the indigenous Indians kind of coming towards them, and they see lots of tourists, they never really pay attention, but this one stopped and started speaking to Greg and asked him what they were doing. And he explained he only stopped to talk to him because he was with his elder, he was with his mother, because obviously again culturally we've now gone too far, like we split ourselves up from our families too much. But nevertheless, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story was that he was explaining about how as a civilization we're kind of moving in the direction of reinventing everything that is within us on the outside. So when you look at talking about the machines and the technocratic society, so everything that is within us, we apparently recreate in the external world. So if you look at batteries, chips, mechanical machines, just to realize that all of that is within us. And when we realize that, when we connect with this concept, and embody it, we'll stop having the need to create this kind of stuff. And I was just thinking, the latest addition to the list of these things is AI, right?
Yeah.
So, which is like someone like who intuitively kind of tells us what to write, what to say, and things like that. And I'm just like, So yeah, I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, but that's kind of popped up as you talked about the organizations and how they operate, and the relationship with the individual and coming as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating story, by the way.
Yes.
And I am remembering who Greg Braden is. Also, I wanted to add a thought come up when you were talking about how we're doubting a little bit Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or at least some of the ways that he frames it. There does come a point where these maps and models aren't useful because they can't fully express how reality actually operates. So a good example is something I wrote in my last newsletter, is this idea that transformation happens in these big jumps and leaps versus them happening steadily. And I had a conversation with someone, maybe it was you, maybe it was someone else, who was saying, well, actually, I kind of feel like it does happen like a tree. And then I was listening to a podcast yesterday where the guy was talking about like 4 different types of transformations. And so at the end of the day, our language inherently splits the field. Like the entire point of language is to say this and not that. And so it's just not adequate. Like, spiral dynamics, all that stuff. It's a great model, but ultimately where we're headed, this is like, beyond levels of consciousness, is that unit of space where we are experiencing things as a seamless whole, as opposed to this collection of parts that we're comparing. Because you're right, like it doesn't make sense for a human being to flourish if they're getting survival needs met, but they don't have bonds with other people that they're close to. Like it's not about like, well, we got this level, so now we can move on to the next level. It's everything all at once, simultaneously, in a kind of dynamic flow and exchange.
Yeah, I love that. I remember reading about the linear versus spiral or cyclical development, and you could look at a tree and say, well, whilst it's growing up, it's also growing down. The roots are getting kind of deeper into the ground, so it's never just that. And I listened to an interesting I think it was an interview about the fact that it's the ego that likes to link with the linear processes, whereas the soul is what can embrace the cyclical, the spiral. I really love that, because it's the rational analytical mind that needs to see the A to go to the B and then C and D, can't can't get his head around that it could be kind of all of those together at the same time. Well, talking of time, that we could go down a rabbit hole with that.
There's at least 4 different podcasts.
But we'll leave that for another conversation. Maybe one last point before we wrap up, because I'm conscious of the time, is you've touched upon it. You've talked about, even as an individual within an organization, ideally, the idea is to bring your whole self to your workplace. And you talk about transcending the self. Maybe it's a good opportunity to maybe touch upon that. What is the path to transcending the self and bringing your whole self? If those two go together or not, I don't know. Yeah, just maybe relay to people your ideas behind that, because they're yeah, I enjoyed reading about them.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So they're kind of 2 separate things, and then they're not at the same time. That's where talking about it gets very confusing and paradoxical. So I'll say from the organizational perspective, the idea of bringing your whole self means that often we kind of divide ourselves into our professional persona and then personal, and then people talk about work-life balance, and it's always about this split, right? It's the identification of a polarity, and polarities exist, and that's valid. But I think a lot of the stress and burnout that people feel is this idea that they have to hyper compartmentalize themselves in order to function within organizations. And the work that I'm really hoping to do in the next 20 years of my life, besides working with individuals, is helping organizations become the kinds of places that need to command and control less and are able to move into a sense and respond model, right? Where people are empowered at all levels of the organization to be truly self-managing and to respond to challenges organically as they come up. But in order to do that, a person needs to be connected to all parts of themselves, not just their ability to live in a chain of command and pass information in a structured way, but also their ability to intuit, right? To be able to respond to this need that's coming up, maybe from a customer or a client, or some issue that is happening in the organization that needs to be addressed right now. So really the short version of this is, if we are not whole or in awareness of our wholeness, then an organization cannot be in wholeness and aware of its wholeness and truly able to evolve into that paradigm. So that's kind of that idea. Now, this idea of self-transcendence, that's really non-dualism. And non-dualism is hard to talk about on the best of days.
We've come back a full circle. Amazing.
Yeah, full circle. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of great non-dual teachers out there, and wisdom traditions have existed for centuries to point to this idea that fundamentally, when we talk about self, we're really talking about something that doesn't exist, not the way that we think it does. And the metaphor I like to use is this idea of like, inside your head, there's this like little guy with these controls, and it's the origin of your thoughts and emotions, and it's got all these plans for what you're going to do, and it's controlling the whole show. Cognitively, we create a sense of being a separate self. That's quite useful, because if you go out onto a road and you do not experience yourself as separate from the car that's coming towards you, you're probably not going to get out of the way. So we're not saying that a sense of separation is a bad thing. What the message of non-dualism is that when our fundamental sense of identity is rooted in that sense of separation, to the extent that you feel no connection outside of that, that's where suffering originates from. It is the root cause of all suffering. So self-transcendence is really, it's not getting rid of your personhood, your personality, your emotions, your character, any of that stuff. That all that's still going to happen organically, just like a hummingbird's going to fly, right? Like all those things are still true. it's really that sense of being this compartmentalized, separate thing that's really just a cognitive illusion that we're trying to transcend. Not trying to transcend, that eventually reaches towards you and invites you to become less separate. It's a very weird process. This is not something that you can put on your to-do list and say, all right, going to vacuum the house. Then I got to pick up the kids. And I think I'm going to transcend myself today. No, that'll be fun. Nope, not really how that works, but it is how things evolve. That eventually, you know, whether it's through these like individual, like, you know, experiences, we call them mystical experiences, or if it's just a gradual invitation into questioning and inquiring into the nature of your experience. That could be books, that could be conversations, that could be hearing a speech or hearing a song. You start to feel the pull towards that, and it really starts to unfold quite naturally that your sense of identity becomes rooted in connection with everything. And there is still a little bit of a sense of separation, but it's more transparent and dim, and it doesn't run the show
What's been
anymore.
your path, if you're okay to share?
Yeah.
Which of those? You've mentioned several things. Was it a combination of all, or was there one that so for me it was or has been several things, but the main thread has been my meditation practice. So I moved from mindfulness to transcendental, or some people know it as Vedic meditation. So that it's in the word, meditation that transcends thought, and just you enter these states. They're just, all I can say, states of being that basically allow you to actually experience what you're trying to describe. So that's why I asked. I'm just curious what it's been, what's the path been for you?
Sure. Well, this will actually give you a little bit of a sneak preview into my next article. The three-legged stool of unfolding, patent pending, because I've kind of identified what I would say are three main components that have pulled me along into that de-identification with, or disidentification with, the voice of the ego, and an identification with wholeness. One leg is definitely what I would call praxis or practice. And so I've had a meditation practice for many years. Also started with a more traditional, like mindfulness, breath counting type of thing. Moved into more surrender practices, very similar to transcendental meditation, Vedic meditation. So that's been a component of my life for a long time. Another is I've just had really good guides. So that's the other leg of the stool. And when I say guides, I don't mean like Yoda and Dagobah.
Why not?
You know, like, I mean, I haven't met him, but boy, that'd be a dream. I mean, just like people that have come into my life and have pointed, pointed the way, or walked with me, even better. So guides, and that could be a therapist, could be a coach, could be, the person bagging your groceries at a supermarket. You know, there's not a special role here. It's just people that come into your life and teach you, and they point. And if you look at where they're pointing, you might experience and know some truth. And then the third leg is community, and really being deeply connected with other people who are just constantly reflecting that truth back. Not necessarily explicitly, we don't get into conversations and say, JJ, remember that you're not a self. That's not what that is. It's just people that through sheer presence, through what they mirror back as true, your giftedness, your wholeness, all the things that those inner voices and inner critics can tell us is not real, they help reflect that back. People like yourself, I would put in that category. I've been extremely blessed to have had a lot of traveling companions on the road, and so a combination of those three factors, I think, is what led to me being able to articulate this stuff at the age of 37. And absent any one of those components, and I've had those seasons, it's a much less stable process, and certainly a falling back into a sense of disconnection and separation and depression.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now we've covered a lot, and maybe you have some questions, the audience, I mean, those who are listening and watching. So we have an invitation, or JJ has an invitation actually, to a workshop he's put together with his colleague, Katrijn. I'm not quite sure what, colleague, no, collaborator,
mentor,
co-creator,
friends. The labels don't really do justice.
But basically,
I would consider her
an
a guide.
opportunity to ask questions, right? So tell us about the workshop.
Yeah, for sure. So Friday, so today is December 12th. So Friday, December 15th, 8:30 a.m. Central Time. I apologize to my European friends that I'm not able to remember or do the time zone conversion.
We need to look it up. I have no idea either.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it may not be a good time. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
It's possible. I know Katrin's in Germany. So we did try to find a time that was, it's actually basically like what time it is right now for you. The workshop would have started 15 minutes ago.
Oh, so that's perfect. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll be posting and she'll be posting just some reminders the next couple of days for that. But December 15th, you can go to my LinkedIn profile, JJ Vega, and get some more details. The workshop's going to be basically a live inquiry session. And the topic is just the question of what is in our circle of control. And it's inspired by this idea popularized by Stephen Covey, who is like the self-improvement guru of the early 90s, where he identified that we have a circle of influence and a circle of concern, and we have to identify what's actually under our control and focus on doing those things and not worrying about the stuff that we can't control. This is kind of a radical inquiry into our assumptions about what's actually under our control. Things like thoughts, emotions. Well, JJ, of course that's under our control. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not saying we have answers. And this is the big thing I want people to understand. This is not a workshop where we're showing up as experts here. Like, we're just fellow seekers. We're going to be asking the questions and creating the environment. This is going to be a conversation. We know not where it'll lead, but we really just want to encourage some healthy dialogue around this idea. And then hopefully people walk away with other questions, and maybe better questions than they had before, that they can take with them into their lives and use as a way to explore some of these ideas. So yeah, that'll be on Friday. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I would say that I'm gonna bring cookies, but those cookies will be just for me because it's virtual. But it'll be a Zoom call. We'll have a Zoom link, and it's free and anyone can show up, and we'd love to be in conversation.
We better get this podcast out quickly then.
No pressure.
Yeah. One idea for people who would be interested in perhaps the organizational side of things we've talked about, bringing the whole self, the way people feel conflicted about their persona at work and at home. We had a wonderful conversation with fellow JJ, a wonderful guy called Jason Johnson. I did a podcast interview with him last month, so find it on my channel. And I know you must have had an incredible conversation with him when you met in person the other day. So that, I can see where
he's a wonderful human being.
A lot to talk about. So okay, we've I want to be conscious of your time. What would you like people to take away from our conversation today in terms of encouragement, in any words of advice? I know it's a bit vague. I can't think of any exact questions. Or maybe something's just come up for you that you want to share as last words. Yeah.
It did. Yeah. No, thank you for creating the space for that. If you read the news and to go on social media, and you engage in a lot of the things that engage our brains these days, the picture is pretty bleak. You know, war and polarization and separation. And I know there are a lot of people that are struggling and suffering out there. And there are things that are easy for me to say and maybe will create resistance for people, you know, because they're obviously not in my shoes and not seeing the world the way I see them. I genuinely believe that the nature of what it is to be human is inherently good. And so the thing that I hope people would take away is that you are inherently good and you are inherently whole. And it is possible to be fully engaged in this experience of life with both the hard things and also the joy and the beauty that's inherent in the experience. And it typically starts with what's already here, what's already present, and then it unfolds from there. So I guess the point would be, and the main thing that I want people to take away is you're awesome. You're already awesome. And I just want to invite you to maybe get curious about what that means for you, however that looks, and see what happens from there.
Or why you're thinking, what nonsense? Where do you start, right? When you can't even relate to that idea. Yeah. Oh, wonderful.
Go outside.
Thank you so much. And I love the sun has just started like coming through your window. There's a we got a little sign. Yeah, we're bright side. We're on the bright side, absolutely. No, that I totally resonate with what you've just said. And thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful. I could talk to you for hours. We'll have to. But for now, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. I really appreciate your time, everything you've shared with us. And yeah, do go and join JJ at the workshop on Friday. Yeah.
Thank you so
Bye
much
for
for
now,
having
everyone.
me. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.